Good evening. Welcome to the Historic Preservation Committee meeting for Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. This meeting is called to order. We will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. Members of the public may participate in the meeting without being physically present by one of the following methods: written comments or comments during the meeting. Members of the public may call and make comments at 702-589-9629. Were any written comments submitted, or?
Just the email.
Just the, oh, okay. So.
It's
at the end of the 5 minutes, do I read this, or how does that work?
You don't need to read it, no. I think it wasn't submitted to the public comment forum. So.
Oh, okay. Just wait till. Hearing that there are no comments at this point, we'll move on to the agenda. Agenda item number 1 for possible action, approval of the minutes of the May 26, 2021 regular meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
Well, I have a question, because I wasn't here, so I really don't have any idea whether the minutes are accurately reflect what was discussed. So I would normally abstain, but if I abstain, then there's not. So do I just go ahead and approve it anyway and say yes?
I would say if the other members think the minutes are fine, that you could trust their opinion.
I can trust their opinion, okay.
I'm careful with Charles, I don't know about trusting that Blair.
All right.
The minutes look fine to me.
Okay, well, we need a second.
I second.
Okay. I agree. Yeah.
Minutes are approved.
You should call for a vote.
We call for
Oh,
a vote.
can I have a vote on the approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. All right, moving on to agenda item number 2 for possible action, recommendation to the City Council on the draft Boulder City Historic Preservation Plan prepared by Nevada Preservation Foundation.
Good afternoon, members of the Historic Preservation Committee. Michael Mays, Community Development Director. The draft plan was originally presented to the committee on January 27th of this year. At that time, the committee provided feedback on the draft plan, and the Nevada Preservation Foundation, who is the consultant that was hired to prepare the plan, went back and made changes. The revised plan was presented on April 28th of this year, and the committee had additional comments. The Nevada Preservation Foundation has made those changes, and the revised plan is before you for consideration tonight. Staff is looking for a motion from the committee to recommend approval of this draft plan so it can be advanced to the City Council. and we can have representatives of the Nevada Preservation Foundation on the phone to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions about the plan?
Well, I do have some questions because unfortunately I wasn't present for all the other reviews. But I don't know that there aren't anything that I don't know that there's anything that would be objectionable to it. Well, let me ask some questions, and maybe you can answer them, Michael. On the very first page, page 17, says, today with the development pressures and an increasing number of historic structures. I don't know what the increasing number of historic structures are. There's a potential for an increased number of historic structures if there are additional overlays or whatever, but as far as I know, there aren't any increasing historic structures within the historic district.
Yeah, I think that was the intent of the consultant, to identify the potential for creation of additional districts as more and more properties become 50 years old and older.
So this would be if indeed we are able to identify some additional, okay,
Correct.
all right. Let me put my,
And why don't we get her on the phone, because I know she's available to answer questions, Marina.
Hello.
Hi, Mariana, this is Susan over at Boulder City Hall. Are you watching the program?
Yes, I am. I'm watching.
Great, and it sounds like you must have it muted because you're coming in
Yes.
nice and clear.
Okay, perfect.
In that case, did you hear that question from new member Charlie Hans?
I did, and I agree with Michael. Our intent was to establish a broader base for resources that would be reaching the 50-year mark. In addition to what is already recognized in the historic district. So our intent was to broaden that scope.
all right, yeah, that's fine. On page 22, that second paragraph, there's a recommendation, says 1991 included the recommendation for a cultural review committee. I think that was a cultural resource committee, but I may be wrong about that. Anyway, it in either case is just a minor. The other, down in the, I'm a little confused about some of these resolution numbers because in Appendix C, the paragraph on page 22 references resolution number 2681. But in Appendix C, it references resolution number 2054. Now, as I understand it, there was the 2054 was repealed by a resolution 4234, which replaced the 1991 Boulder City Master Plan with the 2003 Master Plan. And then there was a new resolution written 2681, which is referenced here, that established the Historic District Preservation Study Commission. So I'm just a little confused about these resolution numbers. I don't know that it really has any impact on the outcome of the document, but it is confusing.
Yeah, I mean, they were listed, the resolutions were listed as a reference. I mean, if there are any that we have overlooked, I'm more than happy to go back and make those edits. But they were just listed as a reference, again, for the appendix. If we need to go, if anyone would like to go back and reference any of those resolutions in the past for whatever reason, for research, they're there. There's just an easy way to reference them. But again, if there's anything that we've overlooked or any typos, I'd be more than happy to make those changes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Maybe a point of clarification, and I'll ask Susan this as well. That reference on page 22 to Resolution 2681, as read, it's my understanding this is the resolution that adopted the Boulder City Master Plan. I think part of the confusion is it references Appendix C, but Appendix C is really focused on historic preservation ordinances resolutions and is not a direct reference here. So maybe that's the reason for the confusion, is it's referring to C, but it's not listed here.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be listed.
Yeah, we can clarify that. That's not a problem.
I think just eliminating listed in Appendix C.
Yep. We can totally
Right,
do
yeah,
that.
that would do it, right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a minor thing, but I get confused easily, so.
It's okay.
There is another little issue I take with, on page, I guess it's document page 26, this is the figure 1, outlining the historic district. And then there's a description then of the outline, but it's not accurate. And the last sentence says, well, New Mexico says the boundaries are New Mexico and 5th Street on the south and Avenue B, F, and L on the east. Well, I think you ought to just eliminate that and say refer to the figure, because Avenue B, there's a little piece of Avenue B on the west that bounds the district. The 5th Street on the south, that's correct. Then it goes up California on the east and turns east on New Mexico, and then goes north again in the alley between F and G. And I think rather than trying to explain all of that, if it just refers to the document, or I mean to the illustration, you can see where the outline is, because that Avenue B, F, and L on the east is not correct, actually. You understand? Am I making any sense at all?
No, that's fine. And we always like to include some roughly, boundary lines in description in writing. But I can definitely add a note there to refer to figure 1 for a graphic. And I cross-referenced a lot of this information to what Courtney also submitted for her survey of the district. So we're taking also some lead from her in her survey work, but we can definitely just make a reference to figure 1. That would be fine.
You know, the reason I bring that up is because in my wanderings around town I constantly run into people that do not understand what the boundaries of the district are. I find people over on Avenue G that think they're in the district and they aren't. I find people that are in the district and they think they shouldn't be in the district.
Right.
So, I think the illustration is beautiful, but there's really no reason to confuse it with words that are sort of confusing. So anyway, that would be my suggestion. But again, it's an editorial thing. It isn't there's another issue I have on page 28, and I hesitate to bring this up, and I'm going to bring it up anyway. The hospital was sold in July 2015 to local developer, and this is in the bottom paragraph, Randolph Schrams, who demolished the property in the spring of 2016 to build a new housing development on the site. Well, he isn't building a new housing development on the site. And I think that should be clarified. I don't see why we would put this document out that has a statement that he's building a new development on the site, which he clearly isn't doing.
And that's fine. If there's an update, if there's any updates on any of these properties or their planned, any developments that are planned on the site, I mean, we're more than happy to update that information if there's something that's definitely more relevant. That's fine. We can make that adjustment. If that site is just sitting empty for now, or I don't know if there are any plans that have moved through city planning for the site. But if any of that information is either new, relevant, or updated, I can definitely make those changes.
I mean, I think in my mind, if you just eliminated to build a new housing development on the site, just eliminated that from the sentence, then it's correct. I mean,
I was just going to say, he is building housing, but it's not a housing development like we think of multiple homes. So
Okay.
I think it's a single-family home, but I
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nothing official has been submitted to the city regarding his intentions.
Okay.
So,
So we can just remove that. That's fine then.
But it is
We'll
zoned for
remove that.
housing.
it is.
So it
is
can't be
resi-
commercial, it can't be, so,
Mariana, just for the sake of history, you could just add the word potentially,
Okay. That's fine.
to potentially build a new housing development on the site. That way, you're not making a statement of fact.
Right. Okay. That sounds great. We can do that.
all right, there's, on the next page, page 29, I just have some questions because I'm just confused here. In the table at the bottom, the second item is, these are potential resources. And it says the Nevada Way Commercial District spanning Nevada Way and Avenue B between Ash and Arizona. I'm confused about that because between Ash and Arizona, first of all, I don't quite know because Ash runs north-south and Arizona runs east-west. But I think that commercial district is already in the historic district. The Nevada Way Commercial District spanning Nevada Way and Avenue B, I think that's already in the historic district. So I don't understand where the potential new buildings are going to come from within that area.
And I believe that was a reference that was part of some of the sites that the HPC had identified in the past. I know that the area is technically in the historic district, but I believe there was some talk about potential overlay zones or something in that nature. But if that seems wrong to the HPC, we can have a discussion about that. And again, these are just potential, right? These are potential areas or properties that meet that age threshold. But again, in terms of the language, if there's anything that is incorrect, then we can make those corrections. That's fine.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm just confused. If I look at a map, I don't understand how that works, but whatever. The other thing that I'm bringing this up just as a point of interest because it's interesting, and I agree with this, that the Boulder City Pool and Racquetball Complex at 681 Avenue B, that of course is outside the district at present. So it would be a potential new addition, if possible. But the problem is that apparently now we have decided to build a new swimming pool. And I'm assuming that the Boulder City Pool and Racquetball Club is going to be, if not demolished, at least changed somehow. And I bring up the point simply because I think it's something that the HPC should be not concerned about, but aware of, because if it is a potential new area, then it needs to be well documented what the current building and structures are prior to any demolition that might occur to build a new swimming pool. And I recognize that it's outside the historic district, but Michael, maybe you can help me with that. I mean, do you see where I'm coming with that? Is at some point down the road, if we were able to include that area in a new overlay, and then we end up demolishing the pool to build a new pool.
Well, I think within the context of this plan, Nevada Preservation Foundation is identifying potential resources. Yeah. So it is an informational document. It's not suggesting, that action needs to be taken at this point on any of these areas. It's just a survey of properties and resources within the community and just bringing it to the community's attention.
No, I understand. And like I said, I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just as a matter of information, I guess. Just one other thing that is confusing to me is on page 34, the first paragraph, the guidelines include information on the building's construction, including the build date, the agency company who built them, the housing type, and the key exterior and architectural features. I don't think those items are included in the guidelines. Those items are included in the Janus report, for instance, and some of them are included in the Mooney report. But I don't think the guidelines, the documents, if you go to the guideline documents, they don't include the built date. They don't include the company that built them. I guess by reference, by implication, they do include the housing type, and they do include key exterior articles. But it's a little confusing, again, for somebody that wanted to find the built date, the age of the company who built them. You wouldn't go to the guidelines to find that information because it isn't there in the guidelines. And so anyway, those are all the comments I had. And by the way, I want to make it clear that I commend the Nevada Preservation Foundation for the work they did. In fact, their conclusions, their recommendations are spot on. I'm extremely pleased with this document. It just reinforces what we have all been saying for quite some time, that things need to be done, changes need to be made. So I do commend them. I think it's a great piece of work, and I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And again, we're more than happy to make any changes to the language or any edits that were overlooked. Is there any other comments from the commission or any other questions? I'd be happy to answer.
I don't have anything else.
Thank you again for revising this and taking care of some last minute edits. It's a really good document, and I'm happy to that we have this as part of our references or arsenal for moving forward with helping to preserve Boulder City's historic resources. So thanks again.
Thank you. Yes, is there again, like I said, we're more than happy to answer any other questions. I know our new executive director, Cynthia, is very happy to meet with the commission and with Michael to discuss any future projects. I know a heritage tourism plan is needed and is definitely recommended to be an independent plan. So we are more than happy to talk to the commission and to the staff whenever it is most convenient and answer any other questions that you all may have.
Thank you. Any comments? I have no more comments.
All right, Madam Chair, we'd be looking for a motion then.
So I do have a motion, not just to advance to City Council for review and approval, but was curious if we could put some additional sidebars with that, and to ask, and I don't know if this is the place to do it, but to request City Council to direct staff to incorporate the goals that are listed here, specifically within the plan, specifically on page 52 of the packet, but 41 of the document. They have a list of goals and objectives for implementing the plan. And it would be great to take those goals and incorporate them into not just the Historic Preservation Committee's 5-year plan or goals, but other city planning documents as necessary.
My recommendation of how to address that, first we have the issue of it being agendized. What you have before you is the action on the plan itself. So in addition to that, with the historic preservation goals, you may recall that those were developed by the committee as an action item, agendized appropriately, and then recommended to the council. The council adopted those goals. So I think what's appropriate is next steps, sending the plan to the sending the plan to the city council, which includes those goals. They weigh in on the plan. If they adopt the plan, then that gives us direction to come back to the committee to reevaluate the Historic Preservation Committee goals, make modifications, and then recommend that on to the council.
That sound good, but yeah, okay, we'll address that, because I think I was also going to address that when we get to that agenda item later in our tonight's agenda regarding our goals. So I'll just bookmark that for later. So I guess the recommendation for the Historic Preservation Committee is to advance the Historic Preservation Plan to the City Council for review and approval.
Is that the motion?
I'm making a motion to, do I need to say that? Sorry. I make a
You said
motion
it.
to advance the Boulder City Historic Preservation Plan to City Council for their review and approval.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion approved.
Yeah, motion carries, motion passes, whatever you like. I'll just, Madam Chair or Vice Chair, I'll make one little note. There will be just a couple other corrections that will be made to the plan, and we can work with Mariana on some of the comments made by Member Hauntz tonight. One other, couple things we noticed on Table 3 for the individually eligible resources, that will need update per the recent update per Courtney Mooney to remove 507 Utah from the list. And then there were a couple of addresses that were missing from Courtney's latest list. So we just didn't want to give you a corrected sheet for that yet because we thought there might be other comments from the committee, but we'll make sure those are all fixed up before the final version goes to the City Council.
When do you anticipate presenting to the city council?
Most likely the first meeting in August.
Okay.
Thank you, Mariana. Sounds like we're done with this item.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Forgot she was still on. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3. Update from the Historic Preservation Ad Hoc Committee. Excuse me. Michael, did you want to move on that, or?
Yeah, this was at your request at the last meeting, and Member Turner. The city has conducted 2 open houses. Approximately 60 people attended the 2 open houses with respect to the draft historic preservation ordinance changes. We've also included in the packet the comment forms that had been filled out by participants of the open houses. We encourage others, if they're interested, to also fill out those forms and provide those to us. The next steps with the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee is receiving any final feedback from the community and feedback from SHPO on the proposed ordinance, and then coming back to the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee to seek direction on their recommendation to the City Council with respect to the draft ordinance.
So I had a question. At the open houses, you had a handout on next steps.
Yeah.
It would be handy to have that as we move forward with what is going on with the ad hoc committee, we being the Historic Preservation Committee, to see what those next steps are. And it'd be handy to have a timeline, I guess, proposed timeline, so that we can keep track of where it is in the process. For instance, you just mentioned that it's going to, or we're going to receive more feedback from the community or the Historic Preservation Committee is supposed to continue to receive comments.
We have the opportunity, as we're waiting for SHPO to respond with their comments on the draft ordinance, that certainly if members of the public still want to provide feedback, we encourage them to do so. And so then we will take all of that feedback and bring it back to the ad hoc committee, along with SHPO's comments, to seek direction from the ad hoc committee on their recommendation to the City Council.
Any idea where the Nevada SHPO is on their review, or any follow-up?
They have not indicated a time frame when they would be able to provide us the feedback. I know that they are currently reviewing it.
And then could you, and I'm reading from that handout of the next steps, one of those steps includes the public hearing before the Planning Commission to review the proposed text amendment with their recommendation, and that they make a recommendation. Can you explain what they would be recommending?
Sure. So the Historic Preservation Ordinance is a part of Title 11 of the City Code. Title 11 of the City Code, any amendments to Title 11 by ordinance are required to be presented to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation in conjunction with a public hearing. They would review that at the public hearing, receive public feedback, and then make a recommendation that would then be presented to the City Council for consideration.
And I also wanted to make a note, since we received the latest version of the draft ordinance, there are actually 2, if not 3, things that are being substantially changed. One is Title 11. The other is Title 3, which is not necessarily addressed in anywhere, really. So am I correct? Title 11 and Title 3, which Title 3, I believe, references how committees and commissions are created and managed, or how they work. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
It
then-
does not need to go to the Planning Commission.
Oh, Title 3 does not?
Correct.
Okay.
Just Title 11 changes.
But those two titles are being revised.
Correct, based on the guidance from the ad hoc committee and discussion with the city attorney. So it's most appropriate for any clarification regarding the creation of the Historic Preservation Commission, that language should be contained in Title III where other committee and commission verbiage is contained.
And then the third thing that I believe is going to be changed, and I don't know technically if this is correct, but the ordinances that created the exterior design guidelines will also need to be changed, even if we don't change the text or the context or the tables that are within, that currently exist. The resolutions currently say, doesn't say mandatory, it says voluntary. So
Right.
won't those need to be changed?
Right, but those aren't ordinances. The guidelines were adopted by resolution.
Oh, sorry, you're right. So
Right.
do those resolutions need to be changed?
I would say that once you have and I apologize because I don't know the draft code nearly as well as you do, but presuming the guidelines would need to be changed as a result of the new ordinance, the committee created those guidelines. So basically, we would bring, at the appropriate time after the new ordinance was adopted, we could bring the guidelines back to you for direction on how those should be changed. And then, once you've got those ready, it would go back to the city council with basically new resolutions that would repeal the old ones so that the new guidelines could be adopted in their place, if that's how the ordinance is structured.
The ad hoc committee has recommended, and staff supports this recommendation, that it would be helpful to utilize a historic preservation consultant to work with the Historic Preservation Committee in modifications and updating those design guidelines to ensure that they're adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards. And so one of the action items that staff is currently undertaking is an RFP following the City Council approval of the fiscal year 22 budget to hire a consulting firm that can do historic preservation work for the city, including updating the design guidelines.
So is there this odd lag or blip in the process if the ordinance changes, is approved, and it specifies that the guidelines will be followed? But if those guidelines state by resolution that they're voluntary rather than mandatory, is that a major conflict?
No, I think it's anticipated that with any changes to the ordinance, it will also have direct guidance on how that's addressed within the guidelines. And so there's going to be potentially a couple of different ways to address that we can certainly discuss with the ad hoc committee and ultimately to city council.
Sorry.
I was saying, as one example, even though there might be a lag for when we adopt new resolutions repealing the old ones, we can certainly make sure that the information on the website is updated. So for instance, right now, the cover sheet on all of the guidelines, states that these guidelines are voluntary. Those cover sheets could all be updated to say, as of the adoption of ordinance number, blank on such and such a date, the attached guidelines, are now mandatory and will be updated in the near future or something like that. We'll take appropriate measures, but, we'll certainly work with the committee, and keep you apprised of that.
Let me just clarify, the ordinance will govern, regardless of what the design guidelines state.
How does that sound?
Sounds confusing to me. No, I think what Blair's been, we've talked about this a lot, because I see that as a potential problem, but, I mean, if that's the way it is, I just look at somebody coming in, we passed the new ordinance and it's adopted. And I can see somebody coming in and says, well, okay, I'm gonna put an addition on the side of my house. And the HPO or the HPC said, well, no, you can't do that in accordance with the new ordinance. And I would go back and say, well, here you have a resolution and a guideline right here that says it's voluntary, so I'm going to do it. So I just see that as a problem. And maybe it's not. Maybe that's just me being negative, I guess. So
I believe I know you've seen the draft ordinance, but there can certainly be a paragraph added somewhere in there with the consult of the city attorney that would have a clause that states something to the effect that the exterior design guidelines previously adopted per, the series of resolutions, to state something to the effect that the guidelines are now mandatory per this code, until said resolutions could be, amended.
and maybe that's all it takes. I don't know. I just think it needs to be pointed out that is a potential hiccup, is all. So I'm sure that Brittany can solve the problem. Miss Walker, she will keep us straight.
Or I wonder if it doesn't, she totally would have to figure this out, but it wouldn't have to be in the ordinance per se, but it could be in the resolution that is bringing the ordinance forward for, no?
It's either a resolution or an ordinance.
Okay.
Let me just reassure the committee that certainly the legal matters related to whatever the city's intent is and what ultimately the city council approves will be addressed through legal review.
Perfect.
So so that I understand what the next steps are, what are the next steps either for the Historic Preservation Committee or the city to continue to inform the public of what's happening?
We continue to provide the information on the website. We'll continue to look for ways to remind the public that material is there. We've done several outreach efforts through social media, first to promote the open houses and to also let them know that we're looking for their input. And we'll continue to do that as we're waiting for SHPO's comments and then bringing it back to the ad hoc committee.
Thank you. I just want to say for the record, I was a little bummed out that the commercial business folks didn't attend the open houses. And if there's a way to reach out again specifically to them, or if they have questions that together as a group they want to, bring before either the committee or the city to talk about what's in the draft ordinance, I guess continue to keep us informed on what we might do to help with that. So. Anything else?
We don't need any action, it's just a report.
Thank you. Okay, what's the next thing? Moving on to agenda item 4 for possible action, update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
And so this is the monthly update on the committee's goals, and as usual, we've highlighted in bold changes to the status of those goals.
So going back to my previous question about incorporating the historic preservation plan's goals and objectives into future planning, we're going to wait to see after City Council receives and approves, fingers crossed, the historic preservation plan before we update our own goals, correct?
I think that's the appropriate course, since you would be basing any modifications to your goals on that plan to wait for its adoption by the City Council.
Okay. So hopefully, if they review it and approve it in August, maybe by the end of August with our meeting, we'll be able to start the conversation about how to incorporate the historic preservation plan's goals into our goals. So, okay. What, do you happen to know the city's strategic plan, what that time period is? Was that 2019 to 2025 or?
Yeah, it's a 5-year plan. We started implementing it in 19, but yeah, it's effective through 2025.
Okay. Does it matter that our plan is, the Historic Preservation Committee's plan is also 5 years and it's mimicking the strategic plan? It goes till 2026, I think, 2024. 2024, but the historic preservation plan goes to 2026. So does it matter that we're going to like kind of change our plans midstream of a 5-year chunk, or?
I think that as it relates to the city's strategic plan, a lot of the same elements that are in the historic preservation plan recommendations are contained in there. And so I think it's certainly appropriate to have this committee reevaluate its goals and present that to the City Council.
Any additional comments?
I just have a question because I see the goal number 6, or the objective number 6, talks about a heritage tourism assessment plan. Has there been any discussion in previous meetings about that? Because me having not been on the committee, I'm not familiar with the heritage tourism assessment plan. Is there anything I need to be reading up, finding, looking at?
Well, let me reiterate, Mariana had mentioned it on the call. The original scope from the Nevada Preservation Foundation had included their development of this plan, the Heritage Tourism Assessment Plan. We were reflecting in the status of the goals that that plan was forthcoming. After further review, they did not believe that they had the resources to be able to complete that plan. So now that's where it's indicated that that would be a separate project in the future.
Okay.
And that obviously would be, subject to budget considerations, prioritization with respect to the city accomplishing historic preservation goals in determining when that plan could move forward.
All right, thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm just kind of want to just go through every month. We're meeting them.
Thanks, Michael. Moving on then to agenda item number 5 for possible action, discussion on public outreach utilizing local publications, city website, and social media.
This was an item the committee had discussed about for a few months, and then since nobody on the committee had taken any action towards it, you agreed to postpone it, and you requested that it come back for the June meeting.
I believe Ray was working on something, but because he's not here, he can't really report out on what that is. So I would like to keep this on the agenda in case he has something to report out on at our next meeting. Any other comments?
Well, the only thing would be, in the future, if anything comes up for like Historic Preservation Month next year, but we'd be reaching out to local publications for that, but if Ray's working on something to general update, like what, Marianne was first talking about when she first brought this up, was just, articles of interest. I think that's what she was getting at, to public, just articles of interest on occasion with the different publications in town. I'm not a very good wordsmith, so I'm not a good candidate for that. So.
Let me interject a little bit here, because I remember what Linda Schrick had in mind with that there would be a monthly or a weekly little article 50 years ago or whatever. And I thought that was a good idea. She said in this, she mentioned she had worked with the Boulder City Hoover Dam Museum regarding historic news articles. Well, I'm a registered researcher with the museum, and just yesterday I finally got back in after a year and some months of, the archives have been closed essentially for some time. So I wouldn't, without overly committing myself right now, I'd like to take a look at that. I'll talk to Tiani and see if she has any ideas about that, because I thought it was kind of a neat idea. I remember a little hometown newspaper that we had where I grew up had a article like that on a monthly or a weekly basis, 30 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever. And there's all kinds of little tidbits that you can find that are of interest,
Right. The only thing is, I'll just keep reminding the committee, since you're not the historic committee of Boulder City, you're the historic preservation committee. So it wouldn't just be about an event that happened 50 years ago, but if it related to a building or a property, that's the key. Not just, somebody was born or died, or this was the first year the Jamboree happened. That isn't related to your scope of work. But if it relates to properties, buildings, et cetera, that's within your wheelhouse, per the code.
I think I understand, Susan, what you're saying, although I'm thinking that perhaps it could just be done outside of the committee. I mean,
And if that's true, then it simply doesn't need to be.
Doesn't need to be agendized.
Exactly.
Or exactly, yeah.
Yeah, any citizen volunteer, anybody who wants to promote that kind of history, or like in conjunction with the museum or with your help through the museum, absolutely. That kind of aspect, as Member Schrick proposed it, actually would be more appropriate for something. It wouldn't need to be a committee action.
Yeah. I think, well, let me work on that a little bit, because one of the things that does come to mind that I'm interested in doing is essentially a history of businesses in Boulder City and how they have changed often. And it is still going on. I mean, we see that just in the last couple of years. I mean, there's been, I don't know how many new businesses started up, and they have started up in old buildings that were another business. So in a way, that is, maybe I can work that, Susan. But I understand what you're saying. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
Item number 6 for possible action, discussion update on the status of properties in the historic district or other potentially eligible properties. Anybody have any questions about other properties that may not be on here that are within the historic district?
I don't have anything that, I do note the note here that Susan mentioned about the 507 Utah Street, because I brought that up when I nominated that building. Was in the Mooney report, there was two conflicting. In one place they said it was eligible, and in another place they said it was contributing. And so they've straightened that out, which is good. I mean, that was needed to be done.
Well, just an observation, I think it was over on Ash Street a few months back, there was somebody put in that they're gonna make some modifications in front of the building to kind of make it conform more to the neighborhood. And that construction appears to be going on. I drove by the other day and there's new facade being built and stuff like that. So that particular project is underway, so hopefully it looks as, when it get done, it looks as nice as the artist renderings did. So that's underway, so that person's going forward. So.
I had a question about the city hall plans for making it ADA accessible, and the building is being shut down in July, right?
Right.
Let me clarify.
Sorry.
The building's not being shut down.
This section.
The council chambers, there will be interior remodeling occurring in here based on guidance from the city council. And the reference to ADA changes is just improvement of the sidewalk access, because the current grade doesn't meet ADA compliance, so that the door behind you can meet ADA requirements by having the appropriate graded sidewalk.
So no changes to the building itself?
No.
Okay, thank you.
To the exterior. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 7 for possible action. Committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for the upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. So there is no meeting in July, so our next meeting is at the end of August. So potential agenda item may be review and first look at updating the committee's, the Historic Preservation Committee's goals based on potential approval of the Historic Preservation Plan by City Council. Yeah, what she said.
Yeah, who knows, city council could kick it back to us to reevaluate or something.
And then just keeping utilizing local publications, city website and social media, that should be on the agenda. Status of properties, of course, the usual. Any other agenda items you guys think should be on the our next meeting in August?
I haven't come up with it yet.
Charlie, you've been here for almost an hour.
I don't have any in mind right now. As I delve into these things, I may eventually.
Well, I should have stated at the beginning of the meeting, thank you and welcome, Charlie, back to the Historic Preservation Committee. We're glad you're back.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. So, and then I do want to make one comment here. I notice we've got a new clock. Because that clock that was up there never worked. And
It was
now-
always right at least twice a day.
Well, I think so. So,
All right. So, moving on to our next agenda item is seeking public comment.
Yep.
Again, if anybody has any comments for any of the items on the agenda tonight, please call 702-589-9629. As there are no comments, this meeting is adjourned.